Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. This is a podcast where I read old books, sometimes fiction, sometimes non-fiction, in the most boring way I can to try and help slow your spinning mind, enough for you to fall asleep in the most natural way possible. The stresses of life often follow us to bed and keep us company, but I'm here to distract you from them and help you drift away. But before you do fall asleep, if you find Sleepy Time Tales helpful and you'd like to support me to help keep it going out to you and thousands of your fellow insomniacs, please consider supporting on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. I owe a few people shout-outs for having signed up recently. I'd like to say thank you very much to Jennifer, Hot Dr. Daddy Shark, Gwen, and I can't remember if I did thank Gina who signed up ages ago. I'm usually pretty good about making notes of those things, but I didn't, so just in case I haven't, and I'm very grateful, so I definitely don't want to miss you. Thank you very much to all of you for signing up and helping support the show. I'm super grateful. You and the other supporters are the ones who keep this show going. So if someone else would like to take a look, go to patreon.com/sleepytimetales. Have a look at the offers. You can sign up at either $2 or $5 level. And if you're interested, keep the show going. And if monthly is a bit much, you can also put a tip in the tip jar. These options are also linked in the show notes below. And you can also just support Sleepy Time Tales by spreading the word. If you know someone who's struggling to sleep, just tell them about it and where to find it. And now we are picking back up at 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where Captain Nemo is showing Monsieur Aronnax around his very fancy ship. So snuggle down, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and listen closely as I lead you down the path to sleep. We return this week to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I thanked Captain Nemo and went up to the shelves of the library. Works on science, morals, and literature abounded in every language, but I did not see one single work on political economy. That subject appeared to be strictly prescribed. Strange to say, all these books were irregularly arranged, in whatever language they were written, and this medley proved that the captain of the Nautilus must have read indiscriminately the books which he took up by chance. "Sir," said I to the captain, "I thank you for having placed this library at my disposal. It contains treasures of science, and I shall profit by them." "This room is not only a library," said Captain Nemo, "it is also a smoking room." "A smoking room?" I cried. "Then one may smoke on board?" "Certainly." "Then, sir, I am forced to believe that you have kept up a communication with Havana." "Not any," answered the captain. "Accept this cigar, Monsieur Aronnax, and though it does not come from Havana, you will be pleased with it, if you are a connoisseur." I took the cigar which was offered me. Its shape recalled the London ones, but it seemed to be made of leaves of gold. I lighted it at a little brazier which was supported upon an elegant bronze stem, and drew the first whiffs with the delight of a lover of smoking who has not smoked for 2 days. "It is excellent, but it is not tobacco." "No," answered the captain. "This tobacco comes neither from Havana nor from the East. It is a kind of seaweed, rich in nicotine, with which the sea provides me, but somewhat sparingly." At that moment, Captain Nemo opened a door which stood opposite to that by which I had entered the library, and I passed into an immense drawing room, splendidly lighted. It was the vast four-sided room, 30 feet long, 18 wide, and 15 high. A luminous ceiling decorated with light arabesques shed a soft, clear light over all the marvels accumulated in this museum. For it was in fact a museum, in which an intelligent and prodigal hand had gathered all the treasures of nature and art, with the artistic confusion which distinguishes a painter's studio. 30 first-rate pictures, uniformly framed, separated by bright drapery, ornamented the walls, which were hung with tapestry of severe design. I saw works of great value, the greater part of which I had admired in the special collections of Europe, and in the exhibitions of paintings. The several schools of the old masters were represented by a Madonna of Raphael, a Virgin of Leonardo da Vinci, a Nymph of Correggio, a Woman of Titian, an Adoration of Veronese, an Assumption of Murillo, a Portrait of Holbein, a Monk of Velasquez, a Martyr of Ribera, a Fair of Rubens, 2 Flemish landscapes of Teniers, 3 little genre pictures of Gerard Dow, Metsu and Paul Potter, 2 specimens of Géricault and Proudhon, and some sea pieces of Bakhuyzen and Venet. Amongst the works of modern painters were pictures with the signatures of Delacroix, Ingres, De Camps, Troyon, Meissonier, Daubigny, etc., and some admirable statues in marble and bronze, after the first antique models, stood upon pedestals in the corners of this magnificent museum. Amazement, as the captain of the Nautilus had predicted, had begun to take possession of me. "Professor," said the strange man, "you must excuse the unceremonious way in which I receive you, and the disorder of this room." "Sir," I answered, "without seeking to know who you are, I recognize in you an artist." "An amateur, nothing more. Formerly I loved to collect these beautiful works created by the hand of man. I sought them greedily and ferreted them out indefatigably, and I've been able to bring together some objects of great value. These are the last souvenirs of that world which is dead to me. In my eyes, your modern artists are already old. They have 2,000 or 3,000 years of existence. I confound them in my own mind. Masters have no age." "And these musicians," said I, pointing out some works of Weber, Rossini, Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Meyerbeer, Herold, Wagner, Auber, Gounod, and a number of others, scattered over a large model piano organ which occupied one of the panels of the drawing room. "These musicians," replied Captain Nemo, "are the contemporaries of Orpheus. For in the memory of the dead all chronological differences are effaced, and I am dead, Professor, as much dead as those of your friends who are sleeping 6 feet under the earth." Captain Nemo was silent and seemed lost in a profound reverie. I contemplated him with deep interest, analyzing in silence the strange expression of his countenance. Leaning on his elbow against an angle of a costly mosaic table, he no longer saw me. He had forgotten my presence. I did not disturb this reverie, and continued my observation of the curiosities which enriched this drawing room. Under elegant glass cases, fixed by copper rivets, were classed and labelled the most precious productions of the sea which had ever been presented to the eye of a naturalist. My delight as a professor may be conceived. The division containing the zoophytes presented the most curious specimens of the 2 groups of polypi and echinoderms. In the first group, the tubipores, were gorgones arranged like a fan, soft sponges of Syria, ices of the Moluccas, penatules, an admirable virgularia of the Norwegian seas, variegated umbellare, acanare, a whole series of madrepores, which my master Milne Edwards had so cleverly classified, amongst which I remarked some wonderful Flabinae oculinae of the island of Bourbon, the Neptune's car of the Antilles, superb varieties of corals. In short, every species of those curious polypi of which entire islands are formed, which will one day become continents. Of the echinoderms, remarkable for their coating of spines, asterae, sea stars, pantocrinae, comatules, asterophons, echini, holotherae, etc., represented individually a complete collection of this group. A somewhat nervous conchiliologist would certainly have fainted before other more numerous cases, in which we classified the specimens of mollusks. It was a collection of inestimable value, which time fails me to describe minutely. Amongst these specimens, I will quote from memory only the elegant royal hammerfish of the Indian Ocean, whose regular white spots stood out brightly on a red and brown ground. An imperial spondyle, bright-colored, bristling with spines, a rare specimen in the European museums. I estimated its value at not less than £1,000. A common hammerfish of the seas of New Holland, which is only procured with difficulty. Exotic Bocardia of Senegal, fragile white bivalve shells which your breath might shatter like a soap bubble. Several varieties of the Aspergillium of Java, a kind of calcareous tube edged with leafy folds, and much debated by amateurs. A whole series of trochai, some are greenish-yellow, found in the American seas, other are reddish-brown, natives of Australian waters, others from the Gulf of Mexico, remarkable for their imbricated shell. Stellari are found in the southern seas, and last and rarest of all, the magnificent spur of New Zealand, and every description of delicate and fragile shells to which science has given appropriate names. Apart, in separate compartments, were spread out chaplets of pearls of the greatest beauty, which reflected the electric light in little sparks of fire. Pink pearls torn from the pinna marina of the Red Sea, green pearls of the Haliodite iris, yellow, blue, and black pearls, the curious productions of the diverse mollusks of every ocean, and certain mussels of the watercourses of the north. Lastly, several species of inestimable value, which had been gathered from the rarest pintodines. Some of these pearls were larger than a pigeon's egg and were worth as much, and more than that, which the traveller Tavernier sold to the Shah of Persia for 3 millions, and surpassed the one in the possession of the Imam of Muscat, which I had believed to be unrivaled in the world. Therefore, to estimate the value of this collection was simply impossible. Captain Nemo must have expended millions in the acquirement of these various specimens, and I was thinking what source he could have drawn from to have been able thus to gratify his fancy for collecting, when I was interrupted by these words. "You're examining my shells, Professor. Unquestionably, they must be interesting to a naturalist, but for me they have a far greater charm, for I have collected them all with my own hand, and there is not a sea on the face of the globe which has escaped my researches." "I can understand, Captain, the delight of wandering about in the midst of such riches. You are one of those who have collected their treasures themselves. No museum in Europe possesses such a collection of the produce of the ocean, but if I exhaust all my admiration upon it, I shall have none left for the vessel which carries it. I do not wish to pry into your secrets, but I must confess that this Nautilus, with the motive power which is confined in it, the contrivances which enable it to be worked, the powerful agent which propels it, all excite my curiosity to the highest pitch. I see suspended on the walls of this room instruments of whose use I am ignorant. You will find these same instruments in my own room, Professor, where I shall have much pleasure in explaining their use to you. But first come and inspect the cabin which is set apart for your own use. You must see how you will be accommodated aboard the Nautilus." I followed Captain Nemo, who, by one of the doors opening from each panel of the drawing room, regained the waist. He conducted me towards the bow, and there I found, not a cabin, but an elegant room with a bed, dressing table, and several other pieces of furniture. I could only thank my host. "Your room adjoins mine," said he, opening a door, "and mine opens into the drawing room that we have just quitted." I entered the captain's room. It had a severe, almost monkish aspect. A small iron bedstead, a table, some articles for the toilet, the whole lighted by a skylight. No comforts, the strictest necessities only. Be so good as to sit down, he said. I seated myself, and he began thus. Chapter 10. All by Electricity. Sir, said Captain Nemo, showing me the instruments hanging on the walls of his room. Here are the contrivances required for the navigation of the Nautilus. Here, as in the drawing room, I have them always under my eyes, and they indicate my position and exact direction in the middle of the ocean. Some are known to you, such as the thermometer, which gives the internal temperature of the Nautilus, the barometer, which indicates the weight of the air and foretells the changes of the weather, the hygrometer, which marks the dryness of the atmosphere, the storm glass, the contents of which, by decomposing, announce the approach of tempests, the compass, which guides my course, the sextant, which shows the latitude by the altitude of the sun, chronometers, by which I calculate the longitude, and glasses for day and night, which I use to examine the points of the horizon when the Nautilus rises to the surface of the waves. These are the usual nautical instruments, I replied, and I know the use of them. But these others, no doubt, answer to the particular requirements of the Nautilus. The dial with the movable needle is a manometer, is it not? It is actually a manometer. But by communication with the water, whose external pressure it indicates, it gets our depth at the same time. And these other instruments, the use of which I cannot guess. Here, Professor, I ought to give you some explanations. Will you be kind enough to listen to me? He was silent for a few moments, then he said, There is a powerful agent, obedient, rapid, easy, which conforms to every use, and reigns supreme on board my vessel. Everything is done by means of it. It lights it, warms it, and it is the soul of my mechanical apparatus. This agent is electricity. Electricity? I cried in surprise. Yes, sir. Nevertheless, Captain, you possess an extreme rapidity of movement, which does not agree with the power of electricity. Until now, its dynamic force has remained under restraint, and has only been able to produce a small amount of power. Professor, said Captain Nemo, my electricity is not everybody's. You know what seawater is composed of? In 1,000 grams are found 96.5% of water, and about 2 2/3% of chloride of sodium. Then in a smaller quantity, chlorides of magnesium and of potassium, bromide of magnesium, sulfate of magnesia, sulfate and carbonate of lime. You see then that chloride of sodium forms a large part of it. So it is in this sodium that I extract from seawater, and of which I compose my ingredients. I owe all to the ocean. It produces electricity, and electricity gives heat, light, motion, and in a word, life to the Nautilus. Oh, I could manufacture the air necessary for my consumption, but it is useless, because I go up to the surface of the water when I please. However, if electricity does not furnish me with air to breathe, it works at least the powerful pumps that are stored in spacious reservoirs, and which enable me to prolong at need, and as long as I will, my stay in the depths of the ocean. It gives a uniform and unintermittent light, which the sun does not. Now, look at this clock. It is electrical and goes with a regularity that defies the best chronometers. I have divided it into 24 hours like the Italian clocks, because for me there is neither night nor day, sun nor moon, but only that factious light that I take with me to the bottom of the sea. Look, just now it is 10 o'clock in the morning. Exactly. Another application of electricity. The star hanging in front of us indicates the speed of the Nautilus. An electric thread puts it in communication with the screw, and the needle indicates the real speed. Look, now we are spinning along with the uniform speed of 15 miles an hour. It is marvelous. And I see, Captain, you are right to make use of this agent that takes place of wind, water, and steam. We have not finished, Monsieur Aronnax, said Captain Nemo, rising. If you will follow me, we will examine the stern of the Nautilus. Really, I knew already the anterior part of this submarine boat, of which this is the exact division, starting from the ship's head. The dining room, 5 yards long, separated from the library by a watertight partition. The library, 5 yards long. The large drawing room, 10 yards long, separated from the captain's room by a second watertight partition. The said room, 5 yards in length, mine, 2.5 yards, and lastly a reservoir of air, 7.5 yards, that extended to the bows. Total length 35 yards, or 105 feet. The partitions had doors that were shut hermetically by means of India rubber instruments, and they ensured the safety of the Nautilus in case of a leak. I followed Captain Nemo through the waist and arrived at the center of the boat. There was a sort of well that opened between two partitions. An iron ladder fastened with an iron hook to the partition led to the upper end. I asked the captain what the ladder was used for. It leads to a small boat, he said. What? You have a boat? I exclaimed in surprise. Of course. An excellent vessel, light and insubmersible, that serves either as a fishing or a pleasure boat. But then when you wish to embark, you're obliged to come to the surface of the water. Not at all. The boat is attached to the upper part of the hull of the Nautilus and occupies a cavity made for it. It is decked, quite watertight, and held together by solid bolts. The ladder leads to a man-made hole in the hull of the Nautilus that corresponds with a similar hole made in the side of the boat. By this double opening, I get into the small vessel. They shut the one belonging to the Nautilus. I shut the other by means of screw pressure. I undo the bolts, and the little boat goes up to the surface of the sea with prodigious rapidity. I then open the panel of the bridge, carefully shut till then. I mast it, hoist my sails, take my oars, and I'm off. But how do you get back on board? I do not come back, Monsieur Aronnax. The Nautilus comes to me. By your orders? By my orders. An electric thread connects us. I telegraph to it, and that is enough. Really, I said, astonished at these marvels. Nothing can be more simple. After having passed by the cage of the staircase that led to the platform, I saw a cabin for 6 feet long in which Conseil and Ned Land, enchanted with their repast, were devouring it with avidity. The door opened into a kitchen 9 feet long, situated between the large storerooms. Their electricity, better than gas itself, did all the cooking. The streams under the furnaces gave out to the sponges of platina a heat, which was regularly kept up and distributed. They also heated a distilling apparatus, which, by evaporation, furnished excellent drinkable water. Near this kitchen was a bathroom, comfortably furnished, with hot and cold water taps. Next to the kitchen was the berth room of the vessel, 16 feet long. But the door was shut, and I could not see the management of it, which might have given me an idea of the number of men employed on board the Nautilus. At the bottom was a fourth partition that separated this office from the engine room. A door opened, and I found myself in the compartment where Captain Nemo, certainly an engineer of very high order, had arranged his locomotive machinery. This engine room, clearly lighted, did not measure less than 65 feet in length. It was divided into two parts. The first contained the materials for producing electricity, and the second the machinery that connected it with the screw. I examined it with great interest in order to understand the machinery of the Nautilus. You see, said the captain, I use Bunsen's contrivances, not Ruhmkorff's. Those would not have been powerful enough. Bunsen's are fewer in number, but strong and large, which experience proves to be the best. The electricity produced passes forward, where it works by electromagnets of great size, on a system of levers and cogwheels, which transmit the movement to the axle of the screw. This one, the diameter of which is 19 feet and thread 23 feet, performs about 120 revolutions in a second. And you get then? a speed of 50 miles an hour. I've seen the Nautilus maneuver before the Abraham Lincoln and have my own ideas as to its speed. But this is not enough. We must see where we go. We must be able to direct it to the right, to the left, above, below. How do you get to the great depths where you find an increasing resistance, which is rated by hundreds of atmospheres? How do you return to the surface of the ocean? And how do you maintain yourselves in the requisite medium? Am I asking too much? Not at all, Professor, replied the captain with some hesitation. Since you may never leave the submarine boat, come into the saloon. It is our usual study, and there you will learn all you want to know about the Nautilus. Chapter 12. Some Figures. A moment after we were seated on a divan in the saloon, smoking, the captain showed me a sketch that gave the plan section and elevation of the Nautilus. Then he began his description in these words. Here, Monsieur Aronnax, are the several dimensions of the boat you are in. It is an elongated cylinder with conical ends. It is very like a cigar in shape, a shape already adopted in London in several constructions of the same sort. The length of this cylinder from stem to stern is exactly 232 feet, and its maximum breadth is 26 feet. It is not built quite like your long voyage steamers, but its lines are sufficiently long, and its curves prolonged enough to allow the water to slide off easily, and oppose no obstacle to its passage. These two dimensions enable you to obtain by simple calculation the surface and cubic contents of the Nautilus. Its area measures 6,032 feet, and its contents about 1,500 cubic yards. That is to say, when completely immersed, it displaces 50,000 feet of water, or weighs 1,500 tons. When I made the plans for this submarine vessel, I meant that 9/10 should be submerged. Consequently, it ought only to displace 9/10 of its bulk, that is to say, only to weigh that number of tons. I ought not, therefore, to have exceeded that weight, constructing it on the aforesaid dimensions. The Nautilus is composed of two hulls, one inside the other outside, drawn by T-shaped irons, which render it very strong. Indeed, owing to this cellular arrangement, it resists like a block, as if it were solid. Its sides cannot yield. It coheres spontaneously, and not by the closeness of its rivets, and the homogeneity of its construction, due to the perfect union of the materials, enables it to defy the roughest seas. These two hulls are composed of steel plates, whose density is from 0.7 to 0.8 that of water. The first is not less than 2.5 inches thick and weighs 394 tons. The second envelope, the keel, 20 inches high and 10 thick, weighs alone 62 tons. The engine, the ballast, the several accessories and apparatus appendages and partitions and bulkheads weigh 961.62 tons. Do you follow all this? I do. Then, when the Nautilus is afloat under these circumstances, 1/10 is out of the water. Now, if I made reservoirs of a size equal to this 10th, or capable of holding 150 tons, and if I fill them with water, the boat, weighing then 1,507 tons, will be completely immersed. That would happen, Professor. These reservoirs are in the lowest parts of the Nautilus. I turn on taps and they fill, and the vessel sinks that had just been level with the surface. Well, Captain, but now we come to the real difficulty. I can understand your rising to the surface, but diving below the surface, does not your submarine contrivance encounter a pressure and consequently undergo an upward thrust of 1 atmosphere for every 30 feet of water, just about 15 pounds per square inch? Just so, sir. Then, unless you quite fill the Nautilus, I do not see how you can draw it down to those depths. Professor, you must not confound statics with dynamics, or you will be exposed to grave errors. There is very little labor spent in attaining the lower regions of the ocean, for all bodies have a tendency to sink. When I wanted to find out the necessary increase of weight required to sink the Nautilus, I had only to calculate the reduction of volume that seawater acquires according to the depth. That is evident. Now, if water is not absolutely incompressible, it is at least capable of very slight compression. Indeed, after the most recent calculations, this reduction, which is only 0.000436 of an atmosphere for each 30 feet of depth. If we want to sink 3,000 feet, I should keep account of the reduction of bulk under a pressure equal to that of a column of water of 1,000 feet. The calculation is easily verified. Now I have supplementary reservoirs capable of holding 100 tons. Therefore, I can sink to a considerable depth. When I wish to rise to the level of the sea, I only let off the water and empty all the reservoirs if I want Nautilus to emerge from the 10th part of her total capacity. I had nothing to object to these reasonings. I admit your calculations, Captain, I replied. I should be wrong to dispute them, since daily experience confirms them. But I foresee a real difficulty in the way. What so? When you are about 1,000 feet deep, the walls of the Nautilus bear a pressure of 100 atmospheres. If, then, just now, you were to empty the supplementary reservoirs, to lighten the vessel, and to go up to the surface, the pumps must overcome the pressure of 100 atmospheres, which is 1,500 pounds per square inch. From that a power, that electricity alone can give, said the captain hastily. I repeat, sir, that the dynamic power of my engines is almost infinite. The pumps of the Nautilus have an enormous power, as you must have observed when their jets of water burst like a torrent upon the Abraham Lincoln. Besides, I use subsidiary reservoirs only to attain a mean depth of 750 to 1,000 fathoms, and that with the view of managing my machines. Also, when I have a mind to visit the depths of the ocean 5 or 6 miles below the surface, I make use of slower but not less infallible means. What are they, Captain? That involves my telling you how the Nautilus is worked. I am impatient to learn. To steer this boat to starboard or port, to turn, in a word, following a horizontal plan, I use an ordinary rudder fixed on the back of the stern post, and with one wheel and some tackle to steer by. But I can also make the Nautilus rise and sink and rise, by a vertical movement, by means of 2 inclined planes fastened to its sides, opposite the center of flotation. Planes that move in every direction and that are worked by powerful levers from the interior. If the planes are kept parallel with the boat, it moves horizontally. If slanted, the Nautilus, according to this inclination and other influence of the screw, either sinks diagonally or rises diagonally as it suits me. And even if I wish to rise more quickly to the surface, I shift the screw, and the pressure of the water causes the Nautilus to rise vertically, like a balloon filled with hydrogen. Bravo, Captain. But how can the steersman follow the route in the middle of the waters? The steersman is placed in a glazed box that is raised above the hull of the Nautilus and furnished with lenses. Are these lenses capable of resisting such pressure? Perfectly. Glass, which breaks at a blow, is nevertheless capable of offering considerable resistance. During some experiments of fishing by electric light in 1864 in the northern seas, we saw plates less than 1/3 of an inch thick resist a pressure of 16 atmospheres. Now the glass that I use is not less than 30 times thicker. Granted, but after all, in order to see, the light must exceed the darkness. And in the midst of the darkness in the water, how can you see? Behind the steersman's cage is placed a powerful electric reflector, the rays from which light up the sea for half a mile in front. Ah, bravo, bravo, Captain. Now I can account for this phosphorescence in the supposed narwhal that puzzled us so. I can ask you if the boarding of the Nautilus and of the Scotia, that has made such a noise, has been the result of a chance rencontre. Quite accidental, sir. I was sailing only 1 fathom below the surface of the water when the shock came. It had no bad result. None, sir. But now how about your rencontre with the Abraham Lincoln? Professor, I am sorry for one of the best vessels in the American Navy, but they attacked me, and I was bound to defend myself. I contented myself, however, with putting the frigate hors de combat. She'll not have any difficulty in getting repaired at the next port. Ah, Commander, your Nautilus is certainly a marvelous boat. Yes, Professor, and I love it as if it was part of myself. If danger threatens one of your vessels on the ocean, the first impression is the feeling of an abyss above and below. On the Nautilus, men's hearts never fail them. No defects to be afraid of, for the double shell is as firm as iron. No rigging to attend to, no sails for the wind to carry away, no boilers to burst, no fire to fear, for the vessel is made of iron, not of wood. No coal to run short, for electricity is the only mechanical agent. No collision to fear, for it alone swims in the deep water. No tempest to brave, for when it dives below the water, it reaches absolute tranquility. There, sir, that is the perfection of vessels. And if it is true that the engineer has more confidence in the vessel than the builder, and the builder than the captain himself, you understand the trust I repose in my Nautilus, for I am at once captain, builder, and engineer. But how could you construct this wonderful Nautilus in secret? Each separate portion, Monsieur Aronnax, was brought from different parts of the globe. The keel was forged at Crusoe, the shaft of the screw at Pen & Co's, London, the iron plates of the hull at Laird's of Liverpool, the screw itself at Scott's at Glasgow. The reservoirs were made by Cale & Co. at Paris, the engine by Krupp in Prussia, its beak in Motala's workshop in Sweden, its mathematical instruments by Hart Brothers of New York, etc. And each of these people had my orders under different names. But these parts had to be put together and arranged. Professor, I had set up my workshops upon a desert island in the ocean. There my workmen, that is to say the brave men that I instructed and educated, and myself have put together our Nautilus. Then, when the work was finished, fire destroyed all trace of our proceedings on this island that I could have jumped over if I had liked. Then the cost of this vessel is great. Monsieur Aronnax, an iron vessel costs £145 per ton. Now the Nautilus weighs 1,500. It came therefore to 67,500, and £80,000 more for fitting it up, and about £200,000 with the works of art and the collections it contains. One last question, Captain Nemo. Ask it, Professor. You are rich? Immensely so, and I could, without missing it, pay the national debt of France. I stared at the singular person who spoke thus. Was he playing upon my credulity? The future would decide that. And that's the end of the chapter, so I'm going to call it there. As always, if you want to pick up where I'm leaving off, you can find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night, and sweet dreams.